Every morning was the same. Sarah got up early, just as the sun was rising, stretched her arms way up high, and quietly got dressed in her exercise gear. It was always the same outfit, tight black leggings that hugged her body and that bright blue tank top she said was comfortable. I never asked why she'd suddenly become so obsessed with jogging or fitness or whatever it was. Honestly, I just figured it was something she was doing to feel better about herself. Maybe worrying about getting older, maybe just bored and needing a new hobby. I didn't pay much attention. Today started like any other. I got up, drank my coffee, and watched Sarah slip quietly out the front door. She was gone before the sun was fully awake, out running around town like she always did. Normally, I didn't even think about it, but this morning as I drove down the road with my window open, enjoying the fresh air and not stressing over work or bills or anything else, I spotted her. At first, I didn't realize it was her. Just some woman jogging by the park near a neighborhood. But then something clicked, and I recognized Sarah's familiar shape, the bounce of her ponytail, the way she stood. For a moment, I was surprised. I'd never actually seen her during her jogs before. It was odd, watching her from a distance, as if she existed in some world I wasn't part of. Then I saw him. He was standing close to her, tall and athletic, clearly comfortable around my wife in a way that set off alarms in my head. My first thought was innocent enough. Maybe he was just another jogger, someone giving her some advice or directions. But then I noticed how close they stood, how comfortable it seemed, how he touched her arm casually, like he'd done it 100 times before. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, not out of anger, not yet, but because something felt deeply wrong. And then I saw her smile. It wasn't the kind of smile you give to a friend or a stranger asking directions. No, it was something warmer, more intimate. And just like that, before I could process what I was seeing clearly, she leaned in and kissed him. This wasn't some awkward, unsure kiss. Not a friendly peck. It was familiar, natural, the kind you give someone you've kissed many times before. My heart slammed into my chest, pounding so loud I thought I might choke. I barely noticed the other cars around me, not even hearing the horn of a passing truck. My head spun, anger rushing up from deep inside me. It burned hot and fierce, filling my gut like acid, rising into my throat. Sarah, my wife, kissing another man. I had two choices. I could head home, pretend I never saw this, swallow the pain like poison, let sit in my gut, and slowly kill me. Or I could deal with it head on. I stomped the gas pedal, but I wasn't driving home. I couldn't go home yet, not after seeing that. Instead, I parked a short distance away, breathing hard, my hands shaking, gripping the wheels so tightly my fingers went numb. Rage filled me, blinding hot. All I could think about was Sarah standing there, smiling at that stranger like it was nothing, betraying me like I was nothing. She kissed him. Sarah kissed another man. She betrayed me, betrayed everything we built together. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to act. Sitting here, doing nothing was unbearable, but rushing in blindly wouldn't fix anything. I got out, my feet heavy as I crossed the grass toward the spot where I'd last seen them. I wanted to confront them right there, expose them to everyone around. But I didn't. Not yet. Something held me back, something colder and sharper. Cheating wasn't something you confronted in anger alone. I had to be smart about this. If I acted without thinking, she could twist the story against me, make me look like the bad guy. I slipped behind a large oak, close enough to hear their conversation clearly. Sarah spoke softly, almost playfully. I have to head back soon. I told him I wouldn't be long. Him. She meant me. She was already thinking about how to lie to me again. The man laughed gently, way too comfortable around her. Relax. He doesn't suspect anything, right? Sarah's answer twisted like a knife. He's been so caught up with work, he barely pays attention. Barely pays attention? The anger burned hotter now, surging through my chest. She thought I was oblivious, that I hadn't noticed the changes, the distance, how she'd suddenly become secretive, attached to her phone, acting like a stranger in our own home. Then I heard the man speak again, his voice low and confident. We can't keep sneaking around forever, Sarah. You know that. My breath stopped cold. She hesitated. I saw the uncertainty on her face, clear as day. She was nervous, maybe afraid to give the wrong answer. I don't know, she finally said, her voice quiet. It's just complicated. Complicated? What exactly was complicated here? She had a husband, a home, and a life we built together. Yet, here she was kissing some other guy and calling it complicated? The man shrugged casually, as if it didn't matter either way. Take your time, Sarah. I'll wait. But you know we have something special. Something real. As if whatever we had was fake. My mind went numb, the coldness sinking into my chest, freezing the anger deep inside. I didn't feel hurt. Not yet. Just stunned and furious. My hand shook slightly as I stepped out of the car, slamming the door harder than intended. The noise echoed, louder than I expected, drawing their attention immediately. Sarah spun around, her eyes widening with shock when she saw me. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The guy beside her straightened up, trying to look casual, confident, as if this were no big deal. But I saw him clearly, saw the brief flash of fear in his eyes when he realized who I was. I walked toward them slowly, deliberately, every step calculated to make them feel my presence, my anger. Don't let me interrupt, I said coldly, letting my gaze shift from Sarah's face to his. Go ahead. You looked comfortable. Sarah's mouth opened again, but I cut her off before she had a chance to lie. Don't even think about it. You don't get to speak right now. The guy squared his shoulders, trying to regain his composure. Look, man, you're misunderstanding. Shut up. I snapped sharply, turning my attention fully onto him, voice low and dangerous enough that he instantly fell silent. He took a cautious step back, sensing I wasn't just some passive husband willing to ignore what I'd seen. Good. Let him be nervous. Let him wonder if I'd snap. I turned my attention back to Sarah, my jaw clenched tight, struggling to keep my voice steady. I looked into the eyes of the woman I'd trusted, the woman I'd shared everything with, the woman who'd kissed me goodbye every morning while lying straight to my face. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. How many mornings had she lied to me? Did she ever really love me? Was I just someone she settled for while waiting for someone better? But I pushed those thoughts aside. This wasn't the time. I stepped closer, my voice calm, almost frighteningly so. How long? Sarah hesitated, eyes flickering with panic. It's not what you think, she whispered, her voice trembling. I laughed once, sharply, humorlessly. Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think. And the only thing you're upset about is that I caught you. She reached out, her hand brushing against my arm, pleading. I jerked away from her touch like she'd burned me. Her hand fell to her side, limp, useless. I glanced back at the other guy, who was watching me carefully, probably wondering if I'd suddenly lose control. Part of me hoped he'd try something stupid, give me a reason to lay him out right there on the sidewalk. But he stayed quiet, smart enough not to push his luck. I turned back to Sarah, letting the silence stretch between us, thick and suffocating, waiting to see if she'd dare offer another pathetic lie. She didn't. I nodded slowly. Got nothing left to say, huh? She looked down at her feet, shoulders slumping. Good, I said sharply. Neither do I. I turned away from them without another word, walking steadily back to my car. I didn't look back. I couldn't, because if I did, I'd lose whatever control I had left. Once in the car, I slammed the door shut, harder than necessary, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. My heart was hammering, pulse roaring in my ears as I struggled to catch my breath. Sarah, my wife, the woman I'd loved more than anything, trusted completely, stood right there and betrayed me without even hesitating. How many mornings had she done this? How many times had she smiled at me, kissed me, and walked out that door straight into another man's arms? I had two paths in front of me. Pretend it never happened, swallow it down until it destroyed me, or take action. I started the engine, pressing down hard on the gas pedal, the tires squealing as I pulled away from the curb. I didn't head home. Instead, I drove aimlessly, letting the road blur past, barely aware of anything except the rage burning in my chest. The image of Sarah leaning into another man's kiss was burned into my mind, sharp and clear, replaying again and again. I needed answers, real answers. Not excuses, not lies. But most of all, I needed her to understand that I knew exactly what she'd done, and that it wouldn't end quietly. Finally, I stopped in an empty parking lot, gripping the wheel until my fingers ached. My breathing slowly steadied, the rage inside shifting from hot fury to something colder, sharper, more focused. This wasn't over. Not even close. I saw her hesitate. Her shoulders tightened slightly, and she shifted nervously from one foot to the other. For a brief moment, I let myself think, let myself hope that she might push him away, say she couldn't go through with it, tell him that she wouldn't leave me. But then, with a quiet sigh, she broke my hope. "It's not easy. It's complicated," she whispered. Complicated? What the hell was complicated about it? She had a husband, a home, a marriage, and yet here she stood, kissing another man, telling him it was complicated? The guy just shrugged, acting calm, confident. "It's fine, Sarah. Take whatever time you need. But you know this is the real thing. The real thing. And our marriage wasn't." Something snapped inside me at that moment. I didn't care about caution anymore. I didn't care about playing it smart or careful. In seconds, before I even realized what I was doing, I stepped out from behind that tree and marched straight toward them, my heart hammering so loudly in my ears I could barely hear my own footsteps. Sarah saw me first. Her face turned white as chalk, her mouth dropping open but no words coming out. The man next to her quickly stepped backward, his confident smile fading into a cautious expression. He sized me up like he thought I was harmless, just some quiet husband who'd watch his life unravel without a fight. He was dead wrong. I said nothing, letting silence fill the air, allowing the weight of my presence to make them squirm. Sarah finally tried to speak. "Honey, wait. Don't." I snapped, voice low and steady but filled with icy fury. "Don't you dare say another word." Her mouth closed instantly. The man cleared his throat, attempting some sort of bravery. "Look, buddy, I don't think you." I turned my gaze to him, eyes narrowed, making him take another step backward instinctively. "You don't talk to me. Ever." He opened his mouth briefly, but wisely closed it without another word. Smart move. I turned back towards Sarah, my wife, the woman who stood beside me, promising loyalty, love, and honesty, now looking at me as if I were a stranger, as if I were interrupting her life. Questions rushed through my head. How many mornings had she done this behind my back? Did our marriage ever mean anything to her? Or was I just some convenient stopgap until she found something better? But none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was making sure she understood clearly what she'd done. I stared in her eyes, cold, furious, controlled. I hope he was worth it. Sarah's face fell, her lips trembling slightly. She reached for me, her hand brushing my arm, trying to keep me close. I pulled away like her touch burned, disgusted. "Don't," I warned sharply. She recoiled, her eyes wide, hurt. Maybe guilty, maybe afraid. Either way, I didn't care. I turned once more to the guy beside her. He watched cautiously, hands shoved into his pockets, nervous energy radiating off him. For a second, I hoped he'd give me a reason to hit him, a reason to let out some of the rage pounding inside me. But he remained silent, tense, and watchful. I leaned closer, voice dangerously low, just loud enough for him alone. "If I ever see you anywhere near my wife again, you'll regret it." He swallowed visibly, his atoms apple-bobbing, clearly understanding the seriousness of my warning. Good. Without another glance, I turned away, walking slowly back toward my car. My heart pounded furiously, my breathing uneven, my fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles were white. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see her standing there, lost and guilty, or him smugly thinking he'd gotten away unscathed. Because this was far from finished. Back in my car, I slammed the door shut and sat there, breathing heavily, feeling my pulse pounding violently in my head. The image replayed endlessly. The kiss, his hand casually touching her, her smile. My stomach twisted into a knot, anger bubbling hotter and hotter. Sarah had betrayed me, destroyed everything, and I wasn't going to let her walk away like nothing happened. The man she kissed, whose name I still didn't know, I hated him with a passion I didn't think possible. But Sarah was even worse. She was the one who had promised me faithfulness, promised me love, promised me forever. Yet here she was acting like none of those promises meant anything. I tightened my grip on the wheel, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself to think clearly instead of succumbing to blind rage. My mind raced with thoughts, images, questions. But none of it mattered now. The only question left was how to deal with this betrayal. I had choices. I could drive home, confront her immediately, watch her struggle to lie her way out. Or I could do nothing, swallow this poison, let it tear me apart quietly, day by day, until there was nothing left. Or I could get smart, find out everything I needed to know, and make sure she never forgot what she'd done. My jaw clenched tightly. My mind was already made up. I wasn't going home yet. Instead, I turned the key, the engine roaring to life, and started driving, not aimlessly, but towards someone who might give me answers. Mike. I watched her closely, waiting for her to respond. How long have you been sleeping with him? My voice was quiet, careful, but sharp as a knife. Sarah hesitated, her mouth open but empty of words. She didn't deny it, didn't immediately jump to tell me I was wrong. That silence confirmed everything. Something in me broke right then. It wasn't anger anymore, not even rage. I felt numb, hollow. I stepped back slowly, shaking my head as disappointment settled heavily into my bones. I see. Wait, Sarah cried, reaching for me, but I jerked my arm away sharply. We're done here, I said flatly, turning to leave. No, please, we have to talk about this. She hurried after me, panic flooding her voice. But I kept moving, each step firm, deliberate, making it clear I had no interest in anything else she had to say. Sarah wasn't giving up, though. Her bare feet hurried across the floor behind me as she tried again, desperate. Just let me explain. I stopped suddenly, turning to look her straight in the eyes, my voice cold. Explain what, Sarah? How you didn't mean to sleep with him? How it just happened? Go ahead, give me your best lie. Her eyes filled with tears, lip trembling as she struggled to speak. I swear it wasn't supposed to. How long? I interrupted, my voice quiet but deadly serious. She flinched, her breath quickening. How long? I repeated, even colder. I don't know, she finally admitted, voice barely a whisper. That hesitation told me all I needed. My jaw tightened painfully. So, today wasn't the first time. She looked away, guilt written clearly across her face. Please, I never meant for it to go this far. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head again. Never meant for it to go this far? You think that makes it better? Tears spilled down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking softly. I felt nothing watching her cry. No sympathy, no sadness, nothing but a deep, dark emptiness. Months of lying, months of sneaking around behind my back while pretending everything was fine. My voice hardened. Did you think you'd never get caught? You think I was that stupid? Sarah shook her head, pleading. I don't know what I thought. I was confused. He was just what? I snapped. Exciting? Better? Different? Or did you just not care? She sobbed openly, pressing her hands against her face, struggling to breathe. I should have felt something, anything, but I couldn't. My heart felt like stone in my chest. Tell me something, Sarah. Was it worth it? Was he worth losing everything? Her sobs grew louder, more desperate. No. God, no. I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold disgust. Too late. I turned again, moving toward the front door, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. Sarah reached out once more, desperately grasping at my sleeve, her grip weak and useless. Don't do this, she begged softly. I looked at her one last time, voice calm, detached. You did this, Sarah, not me. Then I opened the door and walked out without another word. Her breathing grew uneven, desperation clear in her eyes. Please don't say that. I laughed, but there was no warmth in it, no humor. It sounded empty, hollow. Why not? Because it hurts? Because now you have to face the truth. She stepped closer, reaching toward me. I still love you. No. I raised my hand sharply, stopping her cold. She froze, startled. No. I repeated firmly, shaking my head slowly. You don't get to say that anymore. You don't get to pretend this was anything other than what it really was. Her lips trembled. I made a mistake. I scoffed, bitterly amused. Forgetting your keys, that's a mistake. Forgetting to buy milk is a mistake. But what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She choked out another sob, her whole body trembling as she stared at me helplessly. I don't want to lose you. I met her eyes directly, coldly. You already lost me. The words were quiet but final, and I watched the meaning hit her hard. The realization finally dawned in her eyes. She saw it now. I wasn't just angry. I was done. Her knees weakened, her face twisting with panic. No, she whispered, shaking her head in denial. Please, we can still fix this. But I stepped past her, moving toward the door. She panicked, rushing forward, grabbing at my shirt desperately. Don't leave. Please don't walk away. I'll cut him off. I promise. Just give me another chance. I took hold of her wrists, gently but firmly peeling her fingers off my shirt. Looking straight in her eyes one last time, I spoke slowly, clearly. You disgust me. Her mouth fell open, but no words followed. Then, without another glance, I opened the door and walked out. The moment the door slammed shut behind me, I felt it all. The anger, the betrayal, the heavy weight of disappointment. It was all still there, burning inside my chest. But at least now, I was free from pretending. I walked away without looking back. Outside, the cool air brushed against my skin, but it did nothing to soothe the fury still boiling beneath the surface. My fists were clenched tightly, my breathing rapid, uneven. I'd heard her calling after me as the door closed, but I didn't slow down, didn't pause to let her feed me another lie, another excuse. That was all she had left. When I got in my car, I opened the door roughly and sank into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind me. But I didn't start the engine. Instead, I just sat there, staring numbly at the steering wheel. An hour earlier, I'd walked into that house believing my marriage was stable. Maybe not perfect, but steady enough to count on. Now I was just sitting in my car, looking back at the front door as if it belonged to someone else. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt alien, unfamiliar, as if it had never truly belonged to me at all. I leaned forward, resting my forehead on the steering wheel. My heartbeat still thundered in my ears, my breathing labored. I had thought walking away would make me feel better, like I'd won something. But all I felt was empty rage, a quiet fury that settled deep in my chest like ice. For months, Sarah had smiled to my face, kissed me goodbye, then met up with someone else behind my back. And I had been blind, oblivious. I shut my eyes tightly, taking a shaky breath. No, I wouldn't let myself take blame for her betrayal. This was her doing, her choice, her selfishness. A sharp knock on the car window startled me out of my thoughts. I looked up. It was Sarah. She stood there, eyes red and swollen, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, broken. I rolled down the window, just enough to speak. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Can we just talk? I stared silently. What was there left to say? She sniffled, wrapping her arms around herself. I know you hate me right now. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. You have no idea. Her face fell even further, fresh tears slipping down her face. But I refused to be moved, not again. I'll do anything, she said desperately, her voice breaking. I'll block him. I'll delete his number. I'll stop running completely if that helps. I laughed bitterly. That's your answer? Deleting numbers? Quitting running? You really think that's what this is about? She stared at me helplessly, stunned. I shook my head, disgusted. You honestly don't get it, Sarah. She reached out again, grabbing the edge of the window. I just made a terrible mistake. But I still love you. I never stopped loving you. No. I interrupted harshly, cutting her off again. You don't get to claim love. You love the comfort I provided, the security of having someone waiting at home. You loved being able to fool me every morning. But you didn't love me enough to be faithful. Her breath hitched, eyes widening. That's not true. Stop, I snapped coldly. No more lies. No more pretending. She was shaking harder now, barely able to hold herself together. I wasn't thinking. It didn't mean anything, I swear. Another empty, bitter laugh escaped me. It didn't mean anything? So, you threw away everything we had for something meaningless. She stared at me, eyes wide and pleading, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to lose you. I shook my head slowly, calmly. Then you shouldn't have kissed another man. Sarah broke completely, crying openly now, her body trembling as she reached for my sleeve again. Her fingers clung weakly to the fabric, desperate and lost. It was too late now. Far too late. And she knew it. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my sleeve, pulling my car keys from my pocket with careful, deliberate movements. Her breath caught sharply in her throat. Wait, please, where are you going? I didn't answer. I didn't owe her an explanation anymore. Sliding the key into the ignition, I started the car, the engine rumbling to life beneath us. Please, she begged, her voice barely audible through the tears. Please don't go. Don't leave me like this. I paused just long enough to look at her one last time, to see the full truth in her face. Sarah stood there, my wife, someone I had promised my whole life to, who had once meant everything to me. But all I saw now was a stranger. A woman who betrayed me, who lied to my face, who took everything we built and casually threw it away. There were no tears left in me, no shouting, just emptiness. You did this, Sarah, I told her quietly, my voice steady, final. Not me. I turned the key, and the car rumbled to life. I didn't say goodbye, didn't give her one last look of pity or anger. I simply shifted into reverse and pulled away, leaving her standing alone in our driveway, hands covering her face, crying silently as her world crumbled. She didn't follow me. She didn't shout my name. She just watched as I drove away, understanding finally that I was gone. And I wasn't coming back. I drove with no destination in mind, not caring where I ended up. The road ahead stretched endlessly into the distance, the scenery blurred by the lingering anger still clouding my mind. For the first time since I discovered Sarah's betrayal, I could finally breathe. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, only that I couldn't stay, not after what she'd done. My entire marriage had collapsed around me, leaving nothing but wreckage, regret, and emptiness. But amid all the pain, one thing was crystal clear. I deserved more than what Sarah had given me. I deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect. I deserved someone who would never betray me the way Sarah had. I kept driving, leaving everything I'd known behind. The home we built, the memories we shared, the woman I thought would always be mine. All gone in an instant. But in the emptiness, clarity finally came. Sarah had chosen her path, chosen to break our vows, to lie, to betray me. Now it was my turn to choose, and I chose freedom. As the miles stretched out before me, that one thought repeated itself again and again in my head. I deserve better, and I was going to find it,